Alright, ladies and gentlemen, we are back at it. This is day 2 of the no-knead sourdough bread. So if you recall from just, well, frankly it would be just a second ago for you guys, where I left off in the last video, it was about 10:45 p.m. Right now it is 6:24 p.m. the following day. So that's frankly getting pretty close to 20 hours that this has been sitting. So let's go ahead and pop off the saran wrap here and see what it looks like. I can already tell by the volume. Oh yeah, that looks terrific. The volume has increased significantly, and see the surfaces dotted very nicely with bubbles all over the place, telling me that the yeast is having a feast, doing a great job. These dough scrapers are always super handy to have. Just a piece of plastic, and it'll help to make sure I get everything out of the bowl. Can you see that? Hopefully I got that on camera. Again, my lighting is the worst in all of YouTube, but see that fantastic stringy gluten texture right there? That is absolutely wonderful. So this has gone very, very well overnight. The important thing to pay attention to is you don't want too much flour getting into the dough. The little bit that I've shaken out here is only a few grams. It's not going to drastically change the hydration of this dough, but we don't want to go overboard. We just want to help and somewhat coat the dough here, so as to make it a little bit more manageable. And like I said, we're just going to leave it like that for about 15 minutes. How did people bake before the advent of saran wrap? Seriously. It's not a rhetorical question. Like, how did they do it? Keep stuff from drying out. Alright, I'm going to set a timer and we'll be back. Alright, we're back. Just did a little bit of watering there. In case the audio is no good, I am planting wheat. Makes sense, right? Since I'm baking bread right here. So, that's a separate video, because obviously it's not going to be an overnight process. It's going to go until about August. But anyway, here we are. A little flour on my hand. We're going to shape this. Over here I've got a Davidsen basket for bread proofing. I use that in sourdough all the time. Hopefully it works out just fine here. One issue I'm seeing is I've got, it's like I guess I didn't do a good enough job mixing the flour and water, because I've got dry clumps of flour here. I'm not sure how that's going to turn out. I should have mixed flour and water better last night before I left it, because apparently there was stuff at the bottom of the bowl that wasn't adequately hydrated. It wasn't totally homogeneous. There's my scraper. Generally when I do sourdough bread, the goal is to get a nice, smooth, tight texture on the outside of the dough when you are shaping it. But it's been a while since I've done no-knead bread, and I don't think that's going to be possible. So I think we just need to get it good enough and transfer it into the Davidsen basket there to proof for a couple hours. So I'm lightly dust it with flour so it's more manageable. And here we go. Give it somewhat of a shake to even out a little bit, and that's how we're going to leave it. Hopefully this turns out great, otherwise I look like an idiot, but I think we're off to a good start. We got 7 o'clock right now on the button, so I'm guessing it's going to be probably around 8:30 or 9 o'clock. Probably closer to 8:30 when this goes in the oven. It's going to be a little bit on the late side, but bear with me. I'll see you soon. Alright, so here we are. It's now 8:15 p.m., so it's been an hour and 15 minutes. And it's not ready yet, but you can see how it bounces back immediately when I touch the dough. We want to get to the point where pressing in on it leaves an indent for a short period of time. You can also see it's risen up, it's gained volume considerably. Further evidence that the yeast is still very much at work. At this point in time, I'm going to go ahead and preheat the oven. I decided I'm going to go with the cast iron Dutch oven. This is my Lodge 7-quart Dutch oven, left to me by my big brother when lost him in a motorcycle accident nearly 7 years ago. So out of sort of a hat tip to him, he never used it for baking. He never baked bread, but the very first time that I baked no-knead bread, this was the only thing that I had to bake it in. And I've used it since many times because it works fantastically well. Cast iron, particularly this behemoth, has a considerable amount of mass, and therefore when you preheat that in an oven to 450 degrees and then you plop a loaf of room temperature bread on it, the mass will retain the heat and it won't really quickly cool down and compromise the formation of crust on the bottom of the loaf. So it works a treat, it really does. Not terribly expensive either. I mean, you can get these at Walmart. You're not breaking the bank, and it is tremendously effective. One thing that I will point out, if you are going to take that route, you do very well to invest in another very cheap bit of cooking ware, and that is parchment paper. The reason why is because I've baked many loaves of bread in this thing, and they kind of, and this could be a result of me overproofing them, I'm not sure which exactly was the culprit, but I always felt that if I were able to gently transfer the dough into the oven, into the Dutch oven here, it would go much better rather than just the thing falling out of the proofing basket or bowl into here and ending up lopsided in the corner somewhere. That about 80% of the time I try to transfer dough carefully into this thing, I end up like having it way off to the side and I get this misshapen looking loaf of bread. So just last year I decided to give this a shot, where I will, when I go to transfer the dough into this straight in the oven, I will cover that with the parchment paper, flip the bowl upside down, and then I'll be able to carefully lower the parchment paper holding onto that down into the Dutch oven. And it'll go much more smoothly, and I can guarantee that I will have the dough in there nicely centered. So that's where we're at right now. I'm going to set a timer for 20 minutes because, again, I don't want to overshoot the proofing of the dough. I certainly don't think we are there right now, so I think I'd be totally healthy with, let's go 15 minutes. We'll creep up on it, but we'll have the oven nice and hot so that when we are ready, we can fire it right in there. Alrighty, we'll see you soon. Okay, so we are pretty much there. You can see a slightly slower rebound. Like that one particularly there. It's a little bit challenging because it's sticky, and so my finger catches it and pulls it back up. But I like where it's at. Our oven's up to temp, 450 Fahrenheit. That's 232 degrees Celsius. And my 15-minute timer is 30 seconds shy of being there, so that worked out pretty well. I think we'll be in really good shape. You guys could get the idea. I'm covering it with the parchment paper. And we're going to flip it upside down. Lower it in. And this is the part where I really need it. Well, that's a problem. So the problem we have here is that this Davidsen basket, which is made out of some sort of reed, is not the right tool for the job when you are dealing with high hydration doughs. So if we were dealing with my typical sourdough bread, which is about 60-65% hydration, this is a fantastic option because it helps to balance out the moisture in the bread, the finished loaf, and it turns out really well. However, with high hydration dough, even though I floured the Davidsen basket as you're supposed to, the overwhelming amount of moisture in this super sticky dough just wicked right through that flour and completely stuck to the basket. And therefore, when I went to transfer it from the Davidsen basket to the Dutch oven, it just tore the bits out of that bread and completely deflated all of that air that was trapped inside the loaf. And that air that's trapped inside the loaf is obviously what gives you that huge oven spring. When you lose all of that air because you rip a gigantic gaping hole in your bread because it sticks to the basket, well, all the air is let out of the bread and you will have absolutely no oven spring to speak of whatsoever, regardless of how well you proofed the dough. So with respect to appearance, aesthetics, this is the point where this whole project goes to pot. Let's go ahead and continue on and see where it goes from here. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you saw what went in. Far from perfect. Let's see what comes out. Yeah. Far from perfect. In this particular case, I don't think it's the recipe that's at fault here. I think it's that Davidsen. That's quite a shame, which means we'll have to do it again. Well, ladies and gentlemen, here we are. Aesthetically, this is a fill, but it is bread. Well, let's cut this thing open. I will say this crust is vastly thinner than the sourdough I traditionally bake, and that's a good thing, because the sourdough I traditionally bake, since it is a lower hydration dough, again it's only about 65%, that crust, you practically need a saw. There's your crumb. Nice pockets on there. Again, the crust is really, really nice. That's my favorite part of it, is how the crust turned out. It's not incredibly thick like my sourdough traditionally is. Let's go ahead and take a smaller bit and see how it tastes. The bottom crust is obviously fairly pronounced. First we'll try a blank. I will say I definitely get the sourness with this method much better than I do with regular sourdough bread, which only takes an evening. This method being that the bread fermented basically 20 hours instead of just a couple. You get much more flavor out of it for sure. I just wish it wasn't flat. It tastes really freaking good. It'd be nice if it was that tall. Not a complete fail, but, well, we're gonna have to, when I finish eating this, we'll bake another one and not use that Davidsen, because that thing is no bueno for high hydration doughs. I learned the hard way. That's some really good bread though. Alright, how do you store these? Because there is no preservatives. From my experience, the best way to store it is with one of these. Plastic bag from your grocery store. Yeah, I had way too much time on my hands, and I folded that bag up after I got home from the store. It is really delicious bread. That may very well be the most tasty bread I've ever baked, even though everything else went wrong. So I'm definitely going to stick with that recipe. I'm not going to change that. I might quote unquote work it a little bit more next time. What I mean by that is we folded it a couple times for the that 15-minute initial sort of rise deal, and then after that I folded it a couple more times basically for the quote-unquote shaping of the bread. I think we're going to be a little more thorough in that next time and just flatten it out a few more times and fold it and repeat, just flattening it out, folding it over on itself, flattening it out, folding it over on itself, maybe 2 or 3 times. I think that'll build a little bit more strength into the crust. Well, it won't be crust at that point, you know, a little more strength into the outer surface of the dough. That's the theory anyway. So we'll try that. That'll be the only thing that and the proofing vessel will be the only thing that I change. We'll just use a regular stainless steel bowl to proof it in. I'm going to call it here. Again, thank you very much for watching. I wish this turned out better, but I'll post it on internet anyways, because there is a lot to learn in fails. I would argue there's more to learn in a failed batch of something, in a failed trial of something, than there is if everything went right the first time. Failure makes you think about what went wrong and how to change it going forward. So please hit the like button and subscribe. I hope you like my content and the detailed discussions that I go through on it, kind of explaining my thought process. And we will see you on the next video. Bye now.